The fire crackled in the hearth, a symphony of warmth that played against the soft murmur of our voices and the gentle clinking of crystal. It was a sound I had cultivated, a perfect, harmonious note in the grand composition of our Christmas Eve. The air in the dining room was thick with the scent of roasted goose and pine, a fragrance I associated with generations of my family, their memories woven into the very garlands that draped the mantelpiece. This dinner, this tradition, was my offering to them, a testament that their legacy of warmth and togetherness was alive in this house. I allowed myself a moment, my eyes sweeping over the table. The silver gleamed under the soft light of the chandelier, each piece polished to a liquid shine. The china, with its delicate border of holly leaves, was a relic from my grandmother, and I felt her presence keenly, approvingly, as I watched my family gathered around it. My son Marcus was in the middle of a story, his hands carving shapes in the air as he recounted a mishap from his university days. His face, so like his father's in his youth, was alight with laughter, his whole being radiating an uncomplicated joy that I cherished. Beside him, Lena listened, her head tilted, a soft smile gracing her lips. She was a quiet presence, my daughter-in-law, with eyes that held a deep, thoughtful light. She had always seemed a little fragile to me, a porcelain doll next to Marcus's boisterous energy, but tonight she glowed in the candlelight, her auburn hair a warm cascade against the deep green of her dress. I felt a surge of contentment so profound it was almost painful. This was the picture I had striven to create. This was wholeness. And then my gaze drifted to the head of the table, to Robert. My husband was leaning back in his chair, the picture of patriarchal ease, his fingers steepled under his chin. He was not looking at Marcus, though he wore a faint, indulgent smile. His attention was fixed with an unnerving intensity on Lena. It was a look I had seen him give important clients, a look of focused appraisal, but here, in the softness of our home, it felt foreign and sharp. I took a slow sip of my wine, the rich Bordeaux suddenly tasting acidic on my tongue. And then, Marcus continued, slapping the table with a laugh that shook the cutlery, Professor Higgins walked in, and there I was, holding the entire model of the Roman Forum, but the glue was still wet. The Colosseum was dangling from my fingers like a dead fish. Lena laughed, a gentle musical sound. "Oh, Marcus, you did not." "I absolutely did," he insisted, beaming. It was then that Robert moved. "A story worthy of a toast, do you not think?" Robert's voice was a smooth baritone, a sound that usually filled me with a sense of security. Now it felt like a performance. He reached for the bottle of wine, not the one in front of him, but the finer, more expensive Burgundy I had been saving for later. He stood, a gesture that felt unnecessarily grand for the intimate setting, and circled the table. He did not go to me or to Marcus. He went to Lena. "Your glass is looking a little empty, my dear," he said, his tone dripping with a paternal kindness that did not reach his eyes. Lena's smile became strained. "Oh, I am fine, Robert, thank you. I really should not." "Nonsense," he interrupted, his voice a gentle command. "It is Christmas." He poured the dark red liquid into her glass, his movements slow, deliberate. And as he did, his fingers, those long, familiar fingers I had held for 30 years, brushed against the back of her hand. It was not a glancing touch, not an accident of proximity. It was a slow, deliberate slide of skin against skin. Lena flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible recoil. She pulled her hand back into her lap as if stung, her eyes darting down to her plate. Robert did not seem to notice, or if he did, he chose to ignore it. He gave her a smile that was meant to be warm but looked predatory in the flickering light. "There," he said, setting the bottle down with a soft thud. "That is better." My heart was a trapped bird beating against my ribs. I looked at Marcus, but he was already launching into another anecdote, completely oblivious, his laughter filling the space where tension should have been acknowledged. I tried to swallow the cold stone that had formed in my throat. "It is nothing, Clara," I told myself firmly. "It is his way." Robert has always been tactile. He is a man of large gestures, of clumsy charm. He does not always understand personal space. He is just being generous, attentive. He is welcoming her properly into the family. But the rationalization felt thin, a flimsy curtain against a gathering storm. The dinner continued, a bizarre pantomime of normalcy. I forced myself to eat, but the goose was like ash in my mouth. I watched, my senses heightened to a painful degree as the pattern repeated itself. Every time Lena's wine glass dipped below half full, Robert was there. He would find a reason, a comment on the food, a question about her work to approach her side of the table. Each time, the pour was slow. Each time, the touch was there. A brush of his knuckles against her shoulder as he leaned past her to offer Marcus more gravy. A lingering press of his hand on the back of her chair as he laughed at one of his own jokes. Lena's politeness was becoming a fortress. She kept her responses short, her eyes downcast. She began to physically shrink, pulling her arms close to her body, creating a smaller target. She was a doe sensing a wolf, frozen in the headlights of his attention. And Marcus, my dear, wonderful, blind Marcus, saw only a wife who was perhaps a little tired, a father who was in a particularly festive mood. The unspoken thing in the room grew, fed by Robert's smiles and Lena's silence. It became a physical presence, hanging heavier than the fragrant pine garlands, thicker than the haze from the fire. It coiled around the table, and with every passing minute, it squeezed the air from my lungs. Finally, as I was clearing the main course plates, my hands trembling so badly the china rattled, Robert made his most brazen move yet. He had just refilled Lena's water glass. "You have such elegant hands, Lena," he remarked, his voice low, meant only for her, though I heard every syllable as if it were shouted. "Like a pianist S." Before she could pull away, he reached out and took her hand in his, turning it over as if examining a precious artifact. His thumb stroked the inside of her wrist. The gesture was intimate, possessive. It was a violation disguised as a compliment. Lena snatched her hand back as if burned, her face flushing a deep, mortified red. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice choked. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping against the wooden floor with a sound that made me wince. I need some air." She fled the room, her footsteps a hurried patter down the hall toward the kitchen. Marcus finally looked up, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Is she all right, Lena?" Robert settled back into his seat, a faint, satisfied smile playing on his lips. He swirled the wine in his glass. "She is fine, son. The room is a little warm, that is all. She just needs a moment." He then turned his gaze to me. His eyes, usually a warm blue, were like chips of ice. They met mine across the table, and in them I saw no guilt, no shame. I saw a challenge. And in that moment, the fragile architecture of the life I had built, the traditions I held sacred, the very foundation of my family, splintered with a silence that was louder than any scream. The feast was over. The whispers had begun. The house was too quiet. It was a silence I had known for 40 years, the comfortable hush of a shared life, but now it felt different. It was a heavy, watchful silence, the kind that presses on your eardrums and amplifies every small sound until it becomes a threat. The soft hum of the refrigerator was a distant alarm. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall was a countdown to something I did not want to face. It had been 3 days since I found that single, blonde hair, a golden thread out of place in the tapestry of our life. And the feeling, that matriarchal intuition which had guided me in raising our children and building this home, would not release its cold grip on my heart. I sat at the small maple desk in the corner of our bedroom, a place I used for writing letters and paying bills. Now, it felt like a command center for an investigation I never wanted to open. Before me lay the phone bills, 6 months' worth, which I had retrieved from the filing cabinet under the pretense of checking our expenses. Robert was in his study, presumably working, the familiar tap-tap-tapping of his keyboard, a sound I had always found comforting. Now, it sounded like a lie. My finger, trembling slightly, traced down the columns of numbers. I was not a detective. I was a grandmother, a mother, a wife, but a wife knows things. She knows the rhythm of her husband's day, the cadence of his voice when he is tired, the look in his eyes when he is preoccupied with a problem at work. Lately, Robert's preoccupation had felt different. It was not the focused frustration of a difficult project. It was a distant, secretive energy. He would smile, but the smile did not reach his eyes. And then I saw it, a number. It appeared again and again, sometimes for calls lasting 20, 30, even 45 minutes. Always in the afternoon, when Robert claimed to be running errands or working late at the office. I picked up the landline handset, its weight familiar in my palm, and dialed the number. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It rang once, twice. "Hello, you have reached the voicemail box of Lena Petrovich. Please leave a message." I dropped the handset as if it had burned me. It clattered onto the cradle, the sound obscenely loud in the silent room. "Lena, Arlena. The girl I had taught to bake apple strudel, the young woman who had cried on my shoulder when her own mother passed. The phone records were not a smoking gun, they were a glacier, cold and massive, slowly grinding my memories into dust. I thought of the stories Robert had told me, the long lunch with a client from out of town, the sudden need to help a junior colleague move apartments, the unexpected traffic jam that made him 2 hours late for our anniversary dinner. Each story, once accepted as a minor inconvenience of life, now seemed flimsy, constructed. The details he had offered so readily felt like too much detail, a performance. I had been the willing audience, nodding along, my suspicion dulled by 40 years of trust. Now that trust was poison, and it was seeping into every corner of our past, tainting even the happiest of memories. Our trip to Venice, was he truly present, or was he thinking of her? The birth of our first grandchild, did he share my joy completely, or was part of him elsewhere? The tapping from the study stopped. I heard his chair creak, his footsteps in the hall. I quickly shuffled the phone bills together, my hands clumsy with panic, and shoved them into the desk drawer just as the bedroom door opened. "Clara, what are you doing sitting in the dark?" Robert stood in the doorway, a silhouette against the hall light. "Just thinking," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin and reedy. He did not turn on the light. He simply stood there, and I could feel him looking at me. The silence stretched, becoming something new, something charged and dangerous. The confrontation did not happen then. It simmered all through a dinner we barely ate, through the evening news we did not watch, through the pretense of reading in the living room. It was a pressure building inside me, a geyser of fear and anger that needed to erupt. It found its outlet later that night, in the sterile white light of the kitchen. I was putting a glass in the dishwasher. Robert was getting a glass of water. The ordinary domesticity of the moment made the words that came out of my mouth feel even more monstrous. "I called Lena today," I said. My back was to him, I could not bear to see his face. The silence behind me was immediate and absolute. I heard the soft click of his glass on the countertop. "Oh," he said, his voice was carefully neutral. "What did she have to say?" I turned around then. I had to. I faced him, my hands gripping the edge of the counter for support. I did not speak to her. I just heard her voice on the answering machine. I took a breath, the air cold in my lungs. "It is a number that appears on our phone bill very often, Robert, very often in the afternoons." His face changed. It was not a change of guilt or shame, but of something else. A wall came down. His eyes, which could be so warm, hardened into chips of flint. "You are checking the phone bills?" he asked, his voice low and dangerously calm. "What is this, Clara? What are you doing?" "I am trying to understand," I said, and I heard the plea in my own voice, the desperation. "I found a hair, Robert, a blonde hair in your study. It was not mine." He let out a short, harsh laugh. It was not a sound of amusement, it was a weapon. "A hair? You are investigating me over a single hair? Good God, Clara, it could have come from anywhere. From a customer at the bank, from the dry cleaners. You are being paranoid." The word hit me with physical force. Paranoia. It was a word for unstable people, for people who were losing their grip. "It is not paranoia," I whispered. "It is the phone calls, the long lunches. You have been different." "Different?" he snapped, taking a step toward me. The space between us crackled with hostility. "I am under a great deal of pressure at work, pressure you do not seem to appreciate. And instead of supporting me, you are digging through phone bills and hunting for stray hairs like some detective in a cheap novel. It is absurd. It is insulting." He was not denying it. He was not explaining. He was attacking me. He was making my evidence seem ridiculous, my feelings seem hysterical. I felt the ground beneath my feet shift. Was I being absurd? Had 40 years of marriage made me so insecure that a single hair could unravel me? "Robert, I began, but he cut me off. I would expect this kind of behavior from a jealous teenager, not from my wife of 40 years. I thought we had trust. I thought we had respect." He shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. It was that look, more than his anger, that shattered me. "I cannot believe you would think so little of me, of us." He picked up his glass of water, turned his back on me, and walked out of the kitchen. I stood there, alone in the blinding light, the hum of the refrigerator now a mocking drone. He had not answered a single question. He had merely turned my fear back on me, making me the villain, the unstable one. The cracks in our foundation were no longer just something I felt, they were a chasm, and I was standing on the wrong side of it, completely alone. The next day, the need for a friendly face, for a touchstone of reality, was a physical ache. I needed to see Lena. I needed to look into her eyes and have my fears quieted. I needed her normalcy, her youth, to wash away the poison of the night before. Perhaps Robert was right. Perhaps I was imagining things. Lena would prove it. I found her in the community garden, kneeling in the dirt beside a plot of rosemary. The sun was warm on my shoulders, but I felt cold to my bone. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat, and she looked so young, so innocent. My heart twisted. I would not believe, that this girl was part of the shadow that had fallen over my life. "Lena," I called out, my voice softer than I intended. She looked up and a smile started to form on her face, but it froze halfway. She saw something in my expression, some trace of the sleepless night, the quiet devastation. Her own smile died, replaced by a look of what was it? Surprise? No, it was too swift, too sharp. It was alarm. "Clara," she said, getting to her feet and brushing the dirt from her knees. "Is everything all right? You look pale." "I am fine," I lied. I approached her, my steps slow. "I just wanted to see you. I had a difficult night with Robert." Her reaction was instantaneous. A wave of crimson flushed her neck and rushed into her cheeks. She looked down at her hands, fussing with a gardening trowel she was holding. She could not meet my eyes. "Oh," she said, and her voice was too high, too tight. "I am sorry to hear that. What happened?" I had not said anything. I had given no details. I had only mentioned a difficult night with my husband, a common enough occurrence in any long marriage. Yet her response was not one of gentle curiosity or confusion. It was the reaction of someone who already knew the subject of the argument, someone who had a stake in its outcome. It was a reaction of pure, unadulterated guilt. I looked at her, at the way her shoulders hunched, at the frantic way she wiped her perfectly clean hands on her trousers. The world seemed to slow down, the sounds of the birds and the distant traffic fading into a dull roar in my ears. In that moment, I did not need a confession. I did not need more phone records or any more evidence. The truth was not in what she said, but in what she could not hide. Her panic, her guilt, it was a confirmation more absolute than any words. It was a silent scream that echoed all my worst fears. My worst fears were no longer fears, they were facts. The foundation of my life had not just cracked, it had collapsed. I stood there, unable to speak, unable to move, watching the young woman I had loved as a daughter drown in the truth she could not voice. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. The old house had never felt so much like a stage. Moonlight streamed through the grand window of the living room, catching dust motes that danced like forgotten memories in the still air. I had set the scene with meticulous care, the final director of a tragedy I never wanted to produce. A fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold dread coiling in my stomach. The scent of roast chicken and rosemary, a recipe handed down from my own mother, hung heavy in the air, a cruel parody of a normal family Sunday. Marcus arrived first, his arm draped comfortably around Lena's shoulders. He looked tired, but his face lit up when he saw the table set with the good china. "Mother, you have outdone yourself," he said, kissing my cheek. His trust was a physical presence in the room, so pure and absolute it was like a fine glass sculpture, beautiful and terrifyingly fragile. I could already hear it shattering. Robert entered a moment later, his demeanor a masterpiece of casual authority. He clapped Marcus on the back, his smile a well-practiced facsimile of paternal pride. "Something smells wonderful, Clara." He did not look at Lena, and she did not look at him. Their avoidance was a chasm masked by pleasantries, and I was the only one who could see the abyss. The meal was an exercise in exquisite torture. I barely tasted the food. I was an observer, my heart a seismograph registering every tiny tremor. Marcus spoke animatedly about a new project at his architecture firm, his passion painting bright colors onto the gray canvas of my fear. Lena nodded along, her smiles not quite reaching her eyes. Robert offered gruff, approving comments, playing the part of the proud patriarch to perfection. I watched my son. I watched the way he looked at his wife with a love that was so unguarded, so complete. I watched the easy respect he showed his father, seeking his opinion, valuing his wisdom. He was living in a house of cards built by the two people he trusted most, and he had no idea the foundation was sand. My heart did not just break, It fissured, a clean, sharp crack that spread through my entire being. The truth would not be a correction, it would be an annihilation. It would rewrite every birthday, every Christmas, every moment of solace he had ever found in this family. It would be a theft of his past as well as his future. When the plates were cleared, Marcus, ever the helper, began gathering the dishes. "Lena, could you give me a hand with these?" he asked, smiling at her. Robert stood. "I will help you, son. Let the women relax." It was a small moment, a throwaway gesture, but it was the final confirmation I needed. He was creating an excuse, a brief window. He wanted to speak with me alone. As the kitchen door swung shut behind them, the silence in the dining room was deafening. Lena stared at her hands, folded neatly on the tablecloth. The fire popped. "It is time, Lena," I said, my voice low and steady, belying the storm within. "There will be no more lies in this house." She flinched as if I had struck her. When she looked up, her eyes were wide with a fear I had never seen before. "Clara, I do not know what you mean." "I saw you," I said, the words simple and brutal. "3 days ago, by the old oak tree where Marcus proposed to you. I saw you with Robert." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The carefully constructed walls around her crumbled, and what was left was not a deceitful woman, but a terrified girl. "It is not what you think," she whispered, a futile, desperate plea. "Then tell me what it is," I said, my tone leaving no room for evasion. "How long?" She looked toward the kitchen door, as if expecting Robert to burst through and save her. But there was only the murmur of male voices, Marcus's cheerful, Robert's a low rumble. The betrayal was happening in stereo. She swallowed hard, and when she spoke, her voice was a broken thread. "It was before." "Before what, Lena?" "Before the wedding." The words hung in the air, ugly and irrevocable. It started a month before Marcus and I were married." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. I had prepared for a wound, but this was a decapitation. A long-standing affair I had suspected, but this was a foundational lie. Their entire marriage, the joy on Marcus's face that bright October day, the years of shared life, it was all built on this rotten secret. Robert had not just betrayed his son, he had orchestrated the betrayal from the very beginning. He had given his blessing on a marriage he was already actively cuckolding. "Why?" The word was a choked gasp. Tears streamed down Lena's face now, silent and hopeless. "I was young. Robert was powerful. He pursued me. He said it would be our secret, that it would make no difference. He said Marcus did not need to know. I was foolish and I was flattered and I was weak. And then I fell in love with Marcus, truly I did, but by then it was too late. Robert, he would not let it end. He said he would tell Marcus everything, destroy everything, if I tried to leave him." The monstrosity of it unfolded before me, each layer more appalling than the last. He had not merely succumbed to temptation, he had entrapped her. He had engineered a situation where his son's happiness was the collateral for his own depravity. I felt a rage so cold it burned, a glacial fire that settled in my bones. The kitchen door opened. Marcus stood there, holding a tray of coffee cups, his smile fading as he took in the scene. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his gaze shifting from Lena's tear-streaked face to my stony one. "Marcus," I said, standing, my legs felt like water. "We need to talk, in the study." The confusion in his eyes was a physical pain to witness. He looked to Lena, but she was a statue of shame. He looked to his father, who had appeared behind him, his expression unreadable. "What is this? What is going on?" I walked to him, took the tray from his hands and set it on the sideboard. I took his arm. "Please, come with me." In the study, surrounded by the books of law and history that Robert loved, I held my son's hands and I tore his world apart. I spoke clearly, gently, sparing him no detail. I told him about the oak tree. I told him about the affair. And then, watching the light in his eyes begin to flicker, I told him when it began. He did not shout. He did not rage. He crumpled. It was a silent, inward collapse, as if every bone in his body had turned to dust. He sank into his father's leather armchair, his broad shoulders folding in on themselves. He looked like the little boy who had fallen from the apple tree and had the wind knocked out of him, only this time the injury was mortal. "Before," he whispered, the word barely audible. "All of it, it was all a lie." I went to him and knelt, taking his hands again. They were cold. "Not all of it," I said, my own tears falling freely now. Your love was real, your heart was real, their deception does not invalidate your truth. It was a hollow comfort, and I knew it. He leaned forward, his head resting on my shoulder, and a single, ragged sob escaped him. I held him as he shook, my own body absorbing the tremors of his imploding universe. I was the anchor in the hurricane of his grief. When the storm within him subsided into a numb silence, I kissed his forehead. "Wait here," I said. I walked back into the living room. Robert was standing by the fire, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Lena was gone, she had fled as I knew she would. He turned to face me, and I saw the defiance in his eyes. He was preparing his defense, ready to negotiate, to manipulate. I did not give him the chance. "You will leave this house," I said, my voice like chipped ice. "You will leave now. You will take nothing that is not yours by blood. You have forfeited any claim to this family, to this name." He scoffed. "Clara, be reasonable. This is my home. That foolish girl, she is clearly hysterical. You cannot believe." "I saw you," I interrupted, the cold fury finally breaking through. "And she confirmed it. She confirmed that you seduced your future daughter-in-law a month before her wedding, that you have been threatening her to maintain your sordid little secret for years. You did not just betray your son, Robert. You curated his betrayal. You are a poison." He took a step back, the smugness evaporating, replaced by a startled anger. "You have no right." "I have every right," I roared, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "I am the matriarch of this family now. I am the keeper of its honor because you have proven yourself devoid of any. You are a stranger to me. You are a disease I am cutting out. Get out." He stared at me, truly seeing the woman he had underestimated for decades. He saw the steel, the resolve, the fire of generations of resilient women burning in my eyes. For a moment, he was just a small, pathetic man caught in his own filth. Without another word, he set the glass down on the mantelpiece, turned, and walked out of the living room. I heard the front door open, and then close with a final, definitive click. The silence that followed was immense. I stood there, trembling with adrenaline and grief, listening to the crackle of the fire that had witnessed it all. I walked to the study. Marcus was standing by the window, staring out into the dark garden. The ruins of his life were reflected in the glass. He did not turn as I entered. "Is he gone?" he asked, his voice flat. "He is gone," I said. We stood there for a long time, two survivors on the shore of a new and desolate world. The old foundation was gone, swept away by the tsunami of truth. There was only rubble. But as I looked at my son's profile, at the stubborn set of his jaw that he had inherited from me, I felt not hope, not yet, but a grim determination. We would rebuild. We would find a way. We would learn to live in the harsh, clean light of this new day. I moved to stand beside him, my hand finding his. He did not pull away. His fingers were limp in mine, but they were there. We would start with that. We would start from there. And as we looked out at the night, a single terrible thought began to take root in the quiet of my mind, a question that would haunt the dawn. He had left too easily. Robert, a man who fought for everything, who commanded courtrooms and controlled lives, had simply walked away. He had not pleaded. He had not threatened. He had just gone, and in that unnerving silence, I knew with a chilling certainty that his exit was not an ending. It was an intermission. The reckoning was over, but the aftermath was yet to begin, and the shape of his retaliation was a dark shadow waiting just beyond the edge of the light.